All right, if you're gearing up for the Queensland bar exams, you know that procedure is everything. It can literally win or lose you a case, and it can definitely make or break your exam. So today, we're doing a super focused, high-yield breakdown of the key UCPR disclosure rules. We're talking no fluff, just what you need to nail it. Let's get right into it.
Okay, so let's put you in the hot seat. Imagine this. The pleadings, they're closed. The other side, they're waiting. Your duty of disclosure has just officially kicked in, and believe me, the clock is ticking. What do you do first? What's your very first procedurally correct move? This isn't just some abstract exam question, right? This is the real deal practical starting point for everything we're about to cover.
So, the UCPR gives you two main ways to go. Think of it like a fork in the road. Path 1, that's Rule 214, is kind of like the main highway. It's the default. You give them a list, then you give them copies. Simple. Path 2, under Rule 216, that's the scenic route. It's the exception you only take when things get complicated, like letting them come to you to inspect the documents. Knowing which path to choose, and when, is absolutely fundamental.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll nail down those two paths. Then we're going to master the default, which is Rule 214, before we dig into the exception, Rule 216. After that, we'll walk through what to do when your privilege claim gets challenged. That's Rule 213. And we'll wrap it all up with a quick-fire exam flashcard session to make sure those key numbers and cases are stuck in your head. Okay, first things first. Let's talk about that fork in the road. Getting your head around the two main options, Rule 214 versus Rule 216, is the foundation for everything else. This choice you make right at the start is going to dictate all your deadlines, your obligations, pretty much the whole flow of disclosure.
Right, on to Section 2. We're starting with Rule 214. This is the super highway we talked about, the default path. You could call it the bread and butter of disclosure in Queensland. For your exams, you have got to know Rule 214 inside and out, no excuses.
And you know what? The process itself is actually pretty straightforward. Rule 214 breaks it down into two clean steps. Step 1, under Subrule 1A, you deliver a list of all your relevant documents. Yep, even the ones you're claiming privilege over. Then, Step 2, and this only happens after they ask for them, under Subrule 1B, you deliver copies of all the non-privileged stuff. List first, copy second. See? Simple.
Now for the deadlines. And you're going to want to burn these numbers into your brain. For your exam, these are non-negotiable. So under Rule 214, 2E, you've got 28 days. 28 days after the pleadings close to get that list delivered. Then, a new clock starts ticking the moment they ask for copies. Under Rule 214.3, you have just 14 days to get those copies out the door. Got it? 28, then 14. Lock it in. And here are a few more little details you've got to know. That list of documents, it can't just be any old list you type up. It has to be in the official Form 19. And what about the cost? Who pays for all that photocopying? Well, the authority here is Balila Pry Limited versus Menzies Excavation. Remember that name, Balila. It says the disclosing party, that's you, pays for copying up front. You might get it back later in costs, but you foot the bill initially. And never ever forget, disclosure is a continuous duty. So that's the main highway. But what happens when providing copies just isn't going to work? Well, that takes us to Section 3, the exception. Rule 216 is your procedural off-ramp for when you're staring down a mountain of documents and delivery is just not feasible.
And this leads to a classic exam question. You can't just decide to use Rule 216 on a whim. You know, the UCPR is very specific. So when exactly are you allowed to say, hey, you want to see them? You got to come to me.
It turns out there are two specific triggers. First one, under Rule 216.1a, is all about convenience. If the sheer number, size, or just the volume of documents makes delivering copies a nightmare, you can opt for inspection. The second trigger, under Rule 216.1b, isn't your choice at all. It's when the other side specifically requests to see the original documents under Rule 215. If they do that, you have to use the inspection process. Okay, so that second trigger brings up a really important point. What exactly is an original document these days? The key case you need to cite here is Shannon v. Park Equipment. You got to remember that one. Shannon v. Park Equipment. The court made it clear that original just means the document in its native format. If it's a Word doc, the .docx file is the original. If it's a signed-to-paper contract, well, that physical piece of paper is the original. Now listen up, because this is a huge difference and a total classic exam trap. Remember how under Rule 214 you have to list everything? Well, under Rule 216, when you're disclosing by inspection, the court in Shannon v. Park clarified that the only list you have to provide is for the documents you are claiming privilege over. That is a massive distinction you need to remember.
Okay, so you've claimed privilege. That naturally leads to the next big question. What happens when the other side turns around and challenges that claim? Well, that brings us to Section 4 and Rule 213. This is your mandatory playbook for how to respond when that happens.
The procedure under Rule 213.2 is super strict, and the timeline is tight. The second you get that challenge, a 7-day clock starts ticking. Within those 7 days, you have to file and serve an affidavit, and it has to be sworn by someone who actually knows the facts, usually the solicitor, and it's got to spell out exactly why you're claiming privilege. You miss that 7-day deadline, you're in a world of hurt.
So here's the million-dollar question. How much detail do you actually give in that affidavit without giving the game away and waiving privilege? The absolute key authority, and you have to know this name, is Interchase Corporation. The court said you have to describe the documents with just enough detail to facilitate the production of a particular document, just in case the court later says, nope, it's not privileged, hand it over.
So, the takeaway from Interchase is this. Your goal is to identify the document, not to describe what's in it. You're essentially giving it a unique label, like letter from our solicitor to the client, dated January 5th. That way the court can find it. You are not telling them what the letter says. It's a very fine line, but it's an absolutely critical one to walk.
All right, we have covered a lot of ground. Now it's time to lock it all in. Section 5 is our rapid-fire review. These are the non-negotiables you've got to have down cold for exam day. Let's do a quick drill. You ready?
First number, 28. What's that? That's the 28 days you have to serve your list of documents after pleadings close under the default Rule 214.
Next number, 14. Remember this one? That's your 14-day window to deliver the copies once they've been requested. Again, that's under Rule 214.
And the most critical one, 7. That's the super tight 7-day deadline to file and serve your affidavit under Rule 213 if your privilege claim gets challenged. Do not miss that one.
And the cases to drop. For describing privileged documents, you cite Interchase Corporation. To define what an original document really means today, you cite Shannon v. Park Equipment. And for who pays for copying up front under Rule 214, you cite Balela Pty Ltd.
And here it is, the whole system on one slide. This is basically your cheat sheet. You've got Rule 214, the default, with its 28 and 14-day deadlines. You've got Rule 216, the exception. And you've got Rule 213 for when privilege is challenged, with that crucial 7-day deadline. That's the whole shebang, right there.
So there you have it. Rules 213, 214, and 216, they're not just random numbers. They are your fundamental toolkit for litigation. And knowing how and when to use each of these tools, well, that's the mark of a great barrister. The only question left is, now that you know what's in the toolkit, which tool are you going to reach for first? Good luck on the exam.